Today is October the 6th, 2020. My name is Anthony Villanueva. I am interviewing Maribel Prado. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Prado, but yeah.
Prado. Prado. Prado for the Latin Oral History Project, Voces Pandemic Project at the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies at Northern Illinois University. This project is in partnership with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas in Austin. Please know, Ms. Prado, that the interview will be placed in the Northern Illinois University libraries and shared with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas in Austin. If there is anything that you do not want to answer or talk about, we will honor your wishes. If there is something that you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because this interview is not conducted in person, I have to ask you a series of questions to which you will reply, yes, I agree, or no, I do not. Do you give the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Northern Illinois University's libraries?
Yes, I do.
Do you grant Northern Illinois universities the right, title, interest, and copyright over the interview and any materials you may provide?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree to allow Northern Illinois University libraries to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I do.
Do you want to grant the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and materials with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas in Austin for inclusion in the Voces Pandemic Oral History Mini Project?
Yes, I do.
Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at Benson and NIU libraries?
Yes, I do.
The Center for Latino and Latin American Studies in Voces receives requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We will only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give your consent for us to share your contact information?
Yes, I do.
Having completed that short questionnaire, Maribel, do you want to tell me about yourself? Tell me about your background.
So I am Mexican American, was raised by a single mom in Chicago, moved to Elgin when I was like 7 in 2000, and then grew up here for like the rest. And then now we live like in Carpentersville. We just got a house last year, and that's pretty much it. And I have an associate in nursing science, and I'm trying to further my education by getting my bachelor's in nursing science.
Do you have any plans to apply to any particular schools?
So I had applied to NIU, but they only do spring and fall, and I kind of want to do an accelerated thing. I feel like I'm getting old, so I need to, I have a plan that I need to get everything done by like 30, 31. So I'm looking to those accelerated schools that have BSN and an MSN available, so I can just go. And then eventually I'm looking for a school with a DNP.
So when did you first hear about COVID?
It was, so our hospital was the one that received the first COVID patient. And I remember I was on the floor, it was a morning shift, and I remember my manager came up to us and it's like, there's a bunch of news media outlets out there, make sure you don't talk to anybody. I didn't even know what it was about. I just know I went into a patient's room, and then I see like the news saying that there's a possible corona patient or novel virus patient at St. Alexius. And I'm like, what? And then from then on, it just kind of, it wasn't on our floor, but it was just on another floor, but it was just overall hospital that was telling us not to talk to anybody outside. As far as that, I didn't really take it seriously. I was just like, oh, it's just like a regular virus. We'll find out more information about it and then we'll get over it. And then that's pretty much when I learned about it. I didn't really like look it up much. I'm one of those people who kind of used to be very like, if I get something, I get it. It's whatever. It's not going to affect me. And I thought because I was young, and relatively healthy, it's when I was like, oh, like if I get it, it's going to hit me like a regular flu. So it's like whatever. And then eventually, our hospital just became just chaotic with how many people were getting. And our hospital turned into, at first we had the clean floors and then we had the COVID floors. So a couple of our floors turned all COVID and we had an extra COVID unit that was never really used, but it was basically for overflow. And our floor was a clean floor, so we didn't really get any patients with COVID. But since I was working registry, so as needed whenever, because I would get more money, they were offering incentive for people to work these units, and you get money. So I was getting paid triple incentive. So I was getting paid $7 extra above my regular pay to go work these units. So that's how I got it, because I was picking up hours like crazy, trying to like take advantage of this money. So
Yeah, we'll talk about how you contracted COVID, but just said that. What hospital do you work in?
St. Alexius Medical Center.
And what town is that in?
In Hoffman Estates.
And that was the first hospital in Illinois to get a COVID patient?
Yeah, we actually had the patient zero. We had her there, and then her husband, I think, came in a couple days after her.
He contracted COVID also?
I'm not sure, but I think they were just worried about, because they lived together and they were watching.
What about your family? Did anybody in your family, were they worried about COVID? You said that you weren't too worried about it in the beginning. Was anybody in your household worried about it?
My mom has a lot of anxiety, so I know she was very worried about it. And she has a couple of risk factors, like obesity, and like she had pre-diabetes. My stepdad is a little bit worried. I feel like a lot of the Mexican community, they feed off of the news media, which is fine. That's how most of us were. But our generation tends to kind of like want to go against what the media tells us. So with them, they tend to follow it. They tend to listen to it. And for me, it was more, no, we will see when we get there. If you worry too much about it, obviously you're going to manifest it or something. So, but she really was. Till this day, she kind of does worry about it.
Still?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have a little 17-year-old brother. And I have an older brother in the city. But again, we're all very like, meh. Like we grew up in the hood for the most part, my big brother and I. So we're kind of like, if nothing has killed us,
So, do your siblings wear a mask?
Yes, we do follow that. I think my brother's a teenager, so he's dirty himself, but when we go out in public, we do wear a mask. We don't really complain like that. I think I complain more because I have to be at work with the mask, and I wear them for like 14 hours a day. But even when I went to Tennessee last week, I would still wear my mask. Even when people weren't wearing it, I still was like, well, I know this is a hot spot. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable wearing it. And even then, like, people were not following social distancing. And I was like, let's just get a table over here. Or, yeah, if you want, you can go get the drinks. But, I mean, well, we can just go to the house, to the cabin and drink. So it's just more like, what you see here is what you see over there. Like, here we have crowds, in some clubs where they have like limited people, but over there they said really like if COVID is not even a thing. So.
Not a thing. Where were you in Tennessee?
So I went to Nashville for the first 2 days, basically to do like the bars and stuff. And then after that, we actually went up the mountains to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. So we were in the actual mountains and stuff.
So you felt pretty safe out there because of the open space?
Yeah, it was just me and my 4 friends. We were just up there in our own cabin. Nashville was more. They're still closing the bars at 11, but people really don't wear masks very much. They don't really follow. And even when because we did a road trip, even when we stopped at Kentucky, and I think I forgot what other town, we walked in to like get gas and get snacks and stuff, and the people in the gas stations were not wearing masks, and you can tell, like, they asked us, "Oh, where you guys?" They're like, "Oh, where you guys from?" And because we all wear a mask, and he's just like, "Oh, Illinois." He's like, "Oh, figures." And we're like, okay. Yeah.
So at what point, or have you realized that it's serious, that it's a serious virus?
Yes, just because what I've seen in the hospital. I got floated to ICU a couple times, and I saw people, intubated and stuff. And then one of my aunts actually passed away from it. So, yeah.
Your aunts. Where did she live?
I think she was more like in Pingree Grove. She was with my
Here in
grandfather.
Illinois.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know how she contracted the virus?
I'm just thinking just from family, or maybe because they didn't really go out much. Again, as Mexicans and as Latinos, we think that we are all pretty much safe around each other. So you just, you still visit here and there. And I think it was maybe one of like those things. And she had a lot of risk factors. So that's just kind of what happened.
Can you tell me some of those risk factors?
Yeah, so I understand. She was obese. She had, I think, some type of asthma or some type of respiratory problem. She did have diabetes. I'm guessing she had high blood pressure. Because even when, like, she took care of my little brother when he used to go to kindergarten, and I used to hang out with her to pick up the kids and everything. And even then, she had trouble not getting around the house, but it was like dyspnea on exertion, so she would do too much and she needs to sit down. So.
Was she hospitalized?
I think it was in Good Shepherd. I'm not one of those hospitals, but yeah, she was intubated, and then they tried to extubate her, and at some point, like, and I remember when I got the news, I was with my boyfriend and his sister and her girlfriend. We went out to eat in St. Charles, and like I remember my mom the days before, she was telling me, "Oh, she's not doing so well. They tried to extubate her, but they couldn't." And for me, like, I've seen people go from almost dying to actually getting a lot better. You just gotta. I just told her, for the most part, I know when people are not gonna do good. So I try to give my mom hope so she can give my aunt hope. And I was like, you never know. Like, we might see an improvement. Extubation and then reintubation happens all the time. It's just trials. And I was at we were eating in St. Charles, and then just got a text from my mom, like, "You need to come, your aunt passed away." And I'm like, and it didn't really hit me, like, I teared up, but then I was like, okay, and it wasn't until I got home that I just like broke down.
So you have your aunt contracted and passed away. Anybody else in your family besides you? Yes.
Some of my aunts and uncles, also, like the older ones. So a lot of my aunts and uncles, they're mostly from like late 30s to like early 50s. They seem to did fine. They self-quarantined because they all work in factories for the most part. So it spreads really quickly there. So yeah.
Do you know if they used masks?
That I do not know. I don't know.
So tell me about yourself. Tell me when you contracted COVID.
It was early May. I remember it was. Those 2 weeks before I got it, I was working insane amounts. So I was working. I think I worked 36 hours a week, but I was doing a lot of night shifts. I can get the differential and I can get the triple centive. And what was happening is we had to make sure that there was no transmission. So we had people call PPE monitors. So we monitor how you put on your PPE. And we had to be, some of us were very meticulously about how you put it on, and some of us really were just like, whatever, like regardless, you're gonna go in there. And then coming out, we had to monitor how they took it off. So I was working on a lot of these COVID units, and then I think maybe it had been exposed already, but I was a Saturday morning. I already felt kind of like groggy, but I was like, maybe it's because I'm working a lot. That entire week though, I will say I was having these headaches, but I suffer from sinuses. So I was like, oh, maybe it's just allergies and sinuses. And I even called employee health. I called in on a Wednesday night, and I was like, she's like, well, how about we just take it safe and we just, call in, and then we'll see how you feel tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And my headaches kind of went down. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm better. And I went back to work Friday. And then Saturday morning, I was like, I don't feel like working, but I'm just going to go. I got floated to the overflow unit. A lot of those rooms were technically airborne rooms, but we don't have enough airborne rooms. And it was at that time already where we ran out of PPE. So we were reusing it. So I would go to people who were suspected PUE, suspected people. I would go from one suspected one to another suspected one with the same gown. And I would leave my actual positive COVID patients till the end to use those gowns, because I can't go from a COVID patient positive to a suspected one in case they actually don't have it.
Right.
So in this little unit, I was coming in and out of these rooms that had aerosols, and it was weird. I remember they made these rooms into airborne rooms by making a vent from the top of the vents with a weird tubing all the way to the outside to try to you would see it all around the hospitals. Yeah. And we had to go from each room, and then as long as they were right next to each other across, you can cross over. So, but I find it kind of useless because it's like we are still admitting these aerosols in, but I was like, whatever, I'm here. And I had my N95, my regular mask. All we had to do is change our gloves. So then, but obviously you get tired of the mask. So when I would be away from the rooms in the nursing station, I would take off my N95, put on my regular mask, and then chart and do what I have to do. And then as soon as I have to go back out in the actual hallways, I put my N95 back on. I got it that day because I got home at 3:30. My boyfriend had asked me, hey, come over to my sister's house. We're all gonna be there and have something to drink. I was like, honestly, babe, I don't feel comfortable going. You have 2 little kids there. I was just in a COVID patient in COVID all day. I'm like, I don't feel so hot. Woke up around 7:30, and my mom went to my grandpa's. And I was like, hey, I don't feel good. I have a fever. And then she came back. My boyfriend, I texted my boyfriend. He's like, I'm glad you didn't come. And yeah, that was the start of that. Just give me 1 second. And then, so then I figured out that it was actually, I was wearing the wrong N95 mask. They fitted. So employee health fits you at the beginning of your orientation. And then eventually you are able to, so then I forgot, they don't really relay this information to your manager for some reason. It's so weird. They fitted me, but then when I asked, they don't have that information. So I don't understand what was the loss of transmission there. Then I had asked ICU to go ahead and refit me again. And it was probably my fault too for not telling him hey, I need you to fit me correctly. He just walked away while I was doing what I had to do. And I didn't really think about being upfront with him. So I was like, whatever. And I had a larger mask on than I should have, but I had bigger cheeks. So I'm like, whatever, maybe it was quarantine, So I was like, oh, maybe it's fine. So I'm guessing it's from that whole week exposure from that. And then it was from Saturday, my first symptoms. Sunday, it was my mom's birthday. So I had to self-quarantine during her birthday. And then I still had classes, online classes with nursing. So I had class on Monday and Wednesday. And I think those were my 3 most horrible days where I felt like shit. And I had my fevers, I had my headaches. I think one day I slept 20 hours. I would get out to try to do what I can. But even in class, like I had my cobija and I was just like, I was like this and I was just like, ah.
So what month was this? What days month was this?
So May 2nd is the day that I came back and I felt
And it
the
lasted for
fever.
how long?
Lasted until like Wednesday. So like the 6th or 7th is when it lasted till.
But you still quarantined. You still quarantined for 14 days.
Technically, well, no, not really, because I got tested on Friday. So I got tested the 7th of May, like legit a week out, like 6 days after I had already told employee health I felt this. They couldn't get me in to get tested until that Friday. And then I still had to self-quarantine, and they called me with results on Monday. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know I'm positive. I mean, and then they're like, well, technically, you can go back to work 10 days after your symptoms. So you can go back to work Wednesday. I was like, okay. Yeah.
So do you go out, when you go out shopping, do you go out to shop or you have food delivered?
No, I go out to shop. I try to do that food delivery thing, but I don't know, sometimes it doesn't work out. Or I just don't order it in time. And I'm a person that if I want it right now, I should go get it. I don't have time to wait 4 or 5 hours and then or a day and then go back.
Yes, Maribel. Family members, neighbor. What about your neighbors? Did any of your neighbors get COVID?
That I don't know. We don't really talk to our neighbors like that. I mean, the only ones that talk to us are like our backdoor neighbors. My mom talks to them. I really don't. So.
Okay. Do you go to church? Does your family go to church?
No.
So did you lose any income because of your illness or because of COVID, or your income has not been impacted at all? Or you did?
So I'm registered. So technically, during the month of March, April, and May, if you got sick, you got paid for the days that you lost, whatever your FTE is. I'm registered, so I only send up every Friday. That way I can get my regular base pay, but I would pick up hours because I would get double or single incentive. So when I got sick, I lost all these hours and I only got paid for that Friday I missed. So my previous check, when I picked up all those hours, I mean, like my net pay was $1,200. Fine. The pay after I got COVID and got my regular just pay for that one day was $200. That's it. So it set me back a lot when it came to my bills. And
because you were used to the incentives and the night differential, and you lost all that. Now, were you able to get back on it?
The only reason I was able to get back on my feet within a month or two is because I became a nurse and I got hired on while my NCLEX was still pending. If they had waited till I actually passed my NCLEX, I think I would have been trying to work a lot harder than I did. And then because we're registry, we're the first people to get dropped. So we're already not guaranteed these hours.
So what do you think? What do you think the state of Illinois? Do you think the state of Illinois has done everything they can to help with COVID?
For the most part, yeah. But I see both sides of the story. Like I see how we have to get back to normalcy, but at the same time, there's a lot of risk because you see how the hot spots and how they're doing. And then with this whole e-learning thing, healthcare workers or people that have gone back to work already have no childcare. They don't have time to be sitting at home with their kids trying to do this whole thing. Kids need that interaction. So I'm glad they're doing this whole, hybrid learning, but kids are kids. Who's to say that, well, I do this at work, pull down my mask while I'm trying to talk or trying to like chart. What makes you think that they're not going to be playing with their mask, So I really don't really have a set opinion on that. I don't know.
Okay. What about the federal government? Do you think the federal government has done enough?
We all know they haven't. Our own president was fighting with, our governors on this thing. And now he thinks that he's unbeatable because he's doing relatively well due to COVID. So I kind of knew this was going to happen, that he was going to downplay it if he did not get that sick. So.
Do you really think he got sick?
I really don't know. It's kind of coincidence that right before the election, he said that he got COVID. So.
So is there anything else you want to talk about, Maribel? Anything that...
I will say that when I saw the in COVID units, it wasn't a lot of like white people. It was a lot of, well, Hawkins is already a predominantly more Middle Eastern place. So I saw a lot of them, and I saw a lot of Latinos. And I really had a feeling, because we're all very family owned. It was a lot of people that I would see, those that were intubated and were getting sick a lot. And it's because we're all very family oriented. We all tend to be with our families, especially extended families. And like I said, we tend to think that, oh, my aunt doesn't have it. We're fine. They don't seem sick, so we're still going to go. So I think I saw, as nurses, I think we are burnt out as well. During the time that I saw that, I think we miss the compassionate part sometimes. I was working in the nurse. I told the nurse, I'm like, this patient had just been extubated, but he was still restrained and he was still confused. And he was like this 50-year-old Hispanic guy. And I think he just tenía la voz rasposa. So he was like, oh, I need to speak to my wife. She hasn't heard from me. And yes, as nurses, we do update family sometimes. But it wouldn't be nice to hear your husband if you hadn't heard him in 2 weeks. So I went in and I'm like, yeah. So I told him, like, hey, he wants to talk to his wife. And he's like, well, I gotta sit there and stand there with the phone there. And I'm like, it's fine, I'll do it. So I geared up. I'm like, just call her and transfer the line in there. And I couldn't really hear what they were saying, but just like hearing his voice, like I remember I answered the phone and I was like, oh, ustedes no sé qué tanto. And she's like, yes. And I heard like the pain in her voice. Like, I don't know if she's expecting bad news or something else. And then I'm like, oh, he wants to talk to you. He's extubated. And I put the phone and like, I even started crying. Like I had my N95, my face shield, and I was like tearing up. And I was like, oh, like, and like, he was like, I miss you. I love you. I'm alive. I'm awake. And I'm like, all the emotions, So I think like we miss that. We're so focused on treating this patient or treating this disease or this virus, but sometimes we forget that they also need human interaction. And I think that's another sad thing. Like these people are stuck in these quarantine rooms. And some of them, like ICU has like the clear room, the clear windows and doors you can see. But right now on my unit, it's just regular doors. So we do hourly rounding. So with my patients, I leave the phone, their patient phone in their bedside table. And before I go in there every other hour, I'm like, hey, I call them like, hey, do you need anything? And they're like, yeah, I just need a cup of water. I need this. I'm like, okay, I'll be there in a bit. And sometimes you just want to get in and get out. But with me, I think I always say this. I'm like, I already had COVID. I don't care. Like, I don't care. So I go in there and I spend time, or I'll go in there without a gown, which I know it's really bad. But for me, it's just more like I'll wash my hands, this and this, and I'll be fine. It's just weird. Like I had this COVID patient over the weekend and he was young. He was a nurse himself, and he was pretty funny and I would make him laugh so much. And when he left, he's like, thank you. He's like, I think I saw you more than I saw most of the nurses there in Texas. And I was like, I would pop in my head like, how you doing, friend? And he would start laughing and he's like, I'm like, you need anything? And he's like, no. And then, I at one point, like I was walking out and then he's like, so what do you think about President Trump, catching COVID and all that stuff? And we had like a 10-minute conversation and, sometimes that's all they want. Because imagine being in there for 4 or 5 days and just having this little room to yourself. You can't even walk outside.
How is it now? How is the census, the COVID census in the hospital?
So we kind of figured that it would go up again as the fall came, and it is going up. Like ICU for a while was down. We closed our overflow unit, but things have kind of changed in the last month or so. And I completely agree with management. It's now become where it's not just 2 units in an overflow unit COVID, because that's not fair to the nurses. That's burning out. Now it's if they have an aneurysm or a brain bleed and they have COVID, too bad, neuro, you're getting it. If it's hospice patient with COVID, too bad, 6-4, you're getting it. Like if it's an ortho patient with COVID, too bad, 2nd floor, you're getting it. It's only if they're intubated that they go to the ICU. And ICU is starting to they're full right now, and for the most part on our floor, I remember it went from 4 to 5 positive COVID patients to now it's, I think, 1 positive COVID patient on the unit. But we're basically testing everybody right now just because if they have anesthesia or procedure, we have to test them. But there is, a lot of people say that the rapid COVID test is false, and then the PCR is the one that tells you for sure if they have it or not. I never had a problem with that, but apparently a couple weeks ago, this guy was asymptomatic, nothing, and he had a rapid done. Rapid was negative. So for when it comes to people who are under investigation and they're asymptomatic, I kid you not, I'm one of those people that goes in just with a mask, and I'm like, whatever, like your rapid was negative, I don't have to worry. Well, no, apparently his PCR came back positive, so he's now a COVID positive patient. So it's like, as nurses, we kind of are sick and tired of the N95s. We're sick and tired of gowning up. So if we see that your rapid came back negative or you're just being tested for a procedure, we go in and out. And now that kind of scares some people like, oh shit, maybe we should take this more seriously, how management tells us to. So as far as that, we're just basically testing everybody because anesthesia wants us and procedures wants us. So I prefer this whole mixed thing. I never really truly liked that the other floors were the ones responsible for COVID because it went from telemetry and an oncology floor going straight to COVID unit, and everybody else was safe. So that's not fair to the rest of the nurses.
All right, Maribell, I want to thank you for taking the time. Like I said, I'm going to have to come back to do the pre-interview once I get the updated sheets. But I'm going to pause it right now because I have to ask you some background questions.
Okay.
Okay, we're back on. I just want to say thank you for you doing this. You have a good day, and this will be on the internet at some point.
Okay. Hopefully, I won't be working at the meet anymore.
Okay, Maria. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.